Hello.
Hello.
How are you, Simon?
I'm very well, thank you, Bruce. How are you?
I'm excellent. I'm in top hole condition. Thank you very much.
Top hole.
Top
Glad
hole.
to hear it. Not any other level of hole.
No other hole, just the top one.
Brilliant. Glad to hear it. And hello, listeners. I
Hello,
hope
you.
you're all well.
Nice to hear you again. Nice to hear us again.
Yes. Nice to be heard.
Nice to be heard.
If this is your first time tuning in, hello. Welcome.
To Factoraly.
We've been practicing that.
We have.
My name's Simon Wells, and I'm a voiceover artist.
My name's Bruce Fielding, and I'm a voiceover artist.
So that's kind of established the plot of the whole thing.
No, not that. I mean, what we are is nothing to do with who we are.
Oh, that's deep, Bruce.
I know. And who we are two people who are actually talking about facts on a podcast.
Indeed. We like facts. We like useless trivia. We like knowledge. We both attend pub quizzes on a regular basis. And we are both that person who stands there in the pub and goes, "Oh, did you know? That reminds me of an interesting thing," etc., etc.
You see, you do that. I go, actually, I think you'll find you're wrong.
I try to be more diplomatic about it. So here we are. We get together regularly, and we find a particular subject, apropos of nothing. It could be as mundane as cucumbers. Our first episode was on cucumbers.
Yes.
It might be something a bit more meaty, but we go away, we research, we come back, we chat.
We haven't done one on meat.
Sorry?
We haven't done one on meat.
Oh, no. Would that alienate the vegan listenership?
Probably would. Let's not do that then.
Have to weigh that up.
No. So what day of the week are we doing this one on, Simon?
What day of the week? Oh, I can see there's a wry smile on your face. Would this be coming out on Thor's Day, Bruce?
It could, or Freya's Day, or Moan's Day, or Woden's Day.
Any of those days.
Any of those days, because we're talking about Vikings today.
We are.
And their gods. 5 out of 7 days are named after Viking gods.
Really?
Hmm.
That's quite a few, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, there's the Romans get their Saturn in on Saturday.
Sure.
And everybody gets their sun in on Sunday.
Yes. But the rest are attributable to Vikings.
Yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant. I feel the need to start off with identifying what is a Viking, because we all know what a Viking is, right? We picture either a blonde or red-headed fella from Norway, big, menacing, threatening, angry, unkempt, wearing a helmet with horns sticking out of it, plundering and pillaging everywhere they went. And that is precisely what everyone will think of when they think of a Viking.
Yeah.
Turns out that's not what it is.
Oh.
That's partly what it is.
Okay. Should we take those one at a time then?
Yeah, go on then. Where do you want to start?
Well, look, let's start with the biggie. Horned helmets.
Okay, horned helmets.
Nope. No horned helmets.
Never happened.
I mean, it doesn't make... If you think about it, if you've got a horn on your helmet, it gives... And somebody's coming down with their sword on your head, it actually stops the sword from sliding off the side of your head, which is what a helmet's there for, is to stop the...
Yes,
is to make the sword slide off.
Actually gives it more grip, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So not a practical battle.
No logic. They did have the nose bits, though. The nose defending bits.
Yes. So this... I found out there is actually one particular event that led rise to the idea of Vikings wearing horned helmets. And this was in the 19th century. Richard Wagner created a series of operas.
Oh, yes.
Based around the Norse sagas, which were written by various Norse folk to sort of tell their histories and their chronicles for future generations. And he wrote these operas based on that. His costume designer, a fellow called Carl Doppler, simply said, "Hey, wouldn't it look cool if we put horns on these helmets for our Vikings in this opera?"
Was Doppler the guy who started to go, no?
Yeah, that's the fella. We need more horns. And I love the fact that so many of our listeners will understand that because they're that kind of person.
Yes, exactly.
So yes, it's totally attributable to these two fellas doing an opera, having horns on their helmets, and everyone just sort of latched onto it and went, "Yeah, that's what a Viking looks like."
Yeah, there was a religious sect that had horns on the inside of their headgear, but I think that's something else entirely.
That's very odd. These things always bring me back to a Blackadder quote of some kind or other, testing my memory. There hasn't been a war run this badly since Olaf the Hairy ordered 80,000 helmets with the horns on the inside.
The gods were a big deal as far as the Vikings were concerned.
Sure.
They basically ruled everything, and the gods didn't care about you, which I quite like the idea of. You know, it's like they were just much more like self-obsessed.
Yes, very distant. My knowledge pretty much extends as far as Thor and Loki in the Marvel movies.
Yeah, and then Odin as well.
And Odin, their dad.
Yeah,
of course,
Odin,
yeah.
obviously, or Woden, as he was also known, hence Wednesday.
Wednesday.
So the story goes that Odin or Woden found two pieces of wood and just formed them into people.
Oh, right.
And the first man and the first woman were created by Woden.
Right.
Interestingly, the first name of those people were Ask and Embla. So A and E. Adam and
very similar
Eve.
to Adam and Eve.
Yes.
Interesting.
So I think Adam and Eve may have been appropriated from the A&E, so to speak.
From A&E. Woden rushes into A&E with a couple of pieces of wood.
Yes. Yeah. I
Comes
need
out with
children. Why were they called Vikings? Were the Vikings a nation?
Right, so this is kind of where this topic suddenly gets really big because, like I said right at the front, I've always associated Vikings as being people from Norway, and that's what they are. The word Viking doesn't speak of a nation, it speaks of a type of person.
It talks of a pirate.
It talks of a pirate, a raider, an invader, someone who comes from a place via a boat to another place.
So that's what Viking means. Viking basically means raider on a boat.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it came to mean by the Middle Ages.
Okay.
Originally, there are a couple of theories as to where the word Viking comes from. There was an old Norse word, vik, V-I-K, meaning a creek or a river or an inlet. And you know, they had boats. They often invaded places through watery inlets. Or there's another word, wick, meaning settlement, which you get in English place names like Hampton Wick and places like that. And they had a tendency to invade places and then settle very, very firmly. So, you know, put those two origins together and you could possibly end up with a Viking or a Viking or a Wicking or whatever. But by the Middle Ages, everyone's perception of these people was that they were pirates, raiders, invaders. So that's what the word Viking sort of ended up becoming. But it doesn't speak of a particular nation. They were from all over Scandinavia, Greenland, Norway, Iceland, wherever, you know, that whole sort of area. They could have come from anywhere. It doesn't mean that they are of a particular nationality. So that idea of a red-headed Norwegian, yes, you would have had Norwegian Vikings, but you would have had Danish Vikings.
Yeah.
You would have had Scandinavian Vikings.
And they didn't have one king, did they? They were all ruled by their sort of the local headsman would be the person who looked after a village or a small area.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
they
very
were
tribal.
Yeah, there wasn't like one nation of Vikings. It was like occasionally they'd get together and have a little party somewhere.
We're going to get together for the annual Viking party.
Raiding
I've
party.
just offended any Scandinavians.
Yeah, sorry about that. But you talked about redheads. I think of them as blondes generally.
Oh, really?
I think of Vikings as like this long flowing blonde hair.
Right, a Thor-like character.
Yeah, and they were blonde, although some of them were brunettes who dyed their hair.
Really?
Yeah,
just for effect.
Well, blonde hair was seen as attractive, so they used a thing called lye, like a soap, that actually bleaches your hair. So they would bleach their hair and sometimes their beards as well and eyebrows. Right. And I don't know about any other parts of their body, but generally they would bleach their hair blonde. So they would be bleach blonde Vikings. And you talked about them being big as well. They had a much better diet than the rest of Europe. They were living on, you know, very healthy things like fish and vegetables. And in fact, they were not that many of them were raiders. Most of them were farmers, and they grew grains, you know, wheat, rye, barley, that sort of thing. And so they had actually quite a good diet, which meant that they were significantly taller than the rest of the people in Europe. I mean, their average height was about 5'6". which
Right.
is, I mean, that's a big Viking. But when everybody else is like 5'2", 5'3", it is quite big. So they may not have been blonde, but they looked blonde. They were big, but not that big.
Right.
So they dyed the hair. They eat well. They like jewellery,
Yes.
very much like jewellery.
Yes.
They were very, very good and very creative at making the most beautiful jewellery, which you can see in some museums.
Yeah, and they really looked after their appearance, didn't they? There are lots of archaeological finds, of really sort of delicately made, intricate combs and brushes and
things are getting
small
earwax
scissors
out.
I didn't know about that one. Viking cotton buds, Bruce?
Yes, Viking cotton buds.
Huh.
Yeah, although generally a little spoon to kind of help.
Yeah.
They also they bathed weekly, which at that time it was like 750 AD, sort of 1100 AD. People did not bath
No.
either at all or very, very seldom.
Yes. So weekly, wow, God, they would have been the cleanest people around.
They were pretty much the cleanest, freshest, blondest people in Europe.
So when these people sort of come and invade a lonely little settlement in another country, you can imagine that it would make quite an impressive first impact.
Yeah, I can't smell them coming.
But I can see their shiny blonde beards a mile away.
But we're alluding to the fact that, when a Viking raid happened on a village, there'd always be this sort of like rape and pillage and things going on.
Yeah.
A lot of the women didn't need much encouragement to go off with these like blonde, muscled rowers to sort of go off to back to a lifestyle where they actually had power.
Yeah.
Because one of the interesting things about Vikings is that the women had as much power as the men.
Yes, I read that.
Women could own property, which in the rest of Europe they couldn't at that time.
Mm-hmm.
They could get divorced
Mm-hmm.
for lots of reasons. I mean, so many reasons. If their husbands were away too much, if they were unfaithful, if they showed too much chest hair.
Really?
There were a lot of reasons why women could get divorced. And when they got divorced, they could claim back the dowry.
Oh, man,
From the
that is
husband.
Incredibly forward-thinking.
Oh,
for the
yeah.
time.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. And they could claim maintenance off their ex-husbands.
Really?
So there was, women were very much empowered. Also, they could be warriors. They weren't just left at home. If they wanted to fight, they could go and fight if they felt like it.
Brilliant.
Very much an equal community.
Yeah.
And obviously, when it comes to the gods as well, the female gods were just as powerful as the male gods. There's a wonderful, the goddess of love is called Freya. And she was the goddess of the sky as well. And she used to ride across the sky in a chariot pulled by cats.
Cats?
Cats.
Just cats?
Just cats.
Well, that's cute, isn't it?
It is.
What a menacing sound, just hearing hundreds of little...
Yes, or purring in the distance.
Coming into battle.
Yeah.
I suppose it could lull the enemy into a full sense of security, couldn't it?
But also, I mean, getting killed in battle was something that was actually quite honourable to do.
Yes.
And when you were killed in battle, you were carried off to Valhalla,
Yes.
which is this wonderful hall of the gods,
Yes.
by the Valkyrie, who are, again, women,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
who are there to look after you and make sure that you got to the afterlife safely.
The Vikings had quite a reach. I mean, they do have this reputation for plundering, pillaging, completely conquering places everywhere they went. It was just that kind of era, wasn't it? Lots of people were doing this.
Yes.
Even within Britain, you had different areas and different regions battling with each other the whole time. Conquering and taking stuff. So they weren't unique in that. But what they were good at was going to a place, putting up a jolly good fight, and then settling there and sticking their ground and making their own settlements. So yes, you had this very intense period of fighting and ransacking and so on and so on. Ransacking, incidentally, Viking word. But then they settled and they got into agriculture and they blended themselves into the local community and they really, really settled down. So by the 800s, there were lots and lots of settlements of Viking folk just in this country alone. But they were really prolific. They got a lot further than I realized. I sort of think of Vikings, just about getting to England and then kind of stopping. But they went everywhere. They got to North Africa. They got to the Middle East. And of course, they got to North America.
Yes.
And there's a chap, obviously there are endless debates as to who discovered America, not including the Native Americans who were clearly there first. But a chap called Leif Erikson from Greenland got to North America a good 500 years before Christopher Columbus or Amerigo Vespucci or any of those people, and made a little settlement in what he called Vinland, which is now Newfoundland.
Yes.
So they got everywhere. They went all over the shop.
And that was 500 years before Columbus.
Yeah, 500 years before. In a wooden longboat. It's quite a distance as well, isn't it, really?
Yeah. I mean, they really must have known how to sail those things. I mean, they knew how to build them as well. I mean, they built longships really, really well. Coming back to where they got to, one of the places we don't really think about it being somewhere where the northern men would settle. If you think about, and you know, a lot of the places they ended in dy as well. That meant a town or a place.
Okay.
So if you think of a place where the North men would settle in a D, Normandy, which is where a lot of them settled in France.
Brilliant. I knew they'd been there, but I didn't realise that's where we got Normandy. That's fantastic. So then by the time, it's interesting, isn't it, sort of how these colonies work over the long term. So Britain was quite largely invaded and settled by Vikings. Normandy was almost entirely settled and created by Vikings. So by the time the Normans invaded Britain, they were pretty much just their own cousins several times removed.
Yes. They used to have a reputation as well for like sacking churches and stuff as well, didn't they? I mean, Lindisfarne was one of the big ones that they went for. And sort of there was this big thing about how they were anti-Christian and how they would, you know, they were these sort of louts from abroad who would come over and had no religion of their own, or sort of worshipped trees and stuff. The real reason why they raided the monasteries is it's the Willie Sutton theory. I don't know if you know who Willie Sutton was.
No.
So Willie Sutton was a bank robber in the 1930s in America.
Right.
And when they said to him, "Why do you rob banks?" he said, "That's where the money is."
I mean, yeah.
Same reason. Vikings plundered monasteries because that's where all the gold and silver was.
See. Right. So no particular sort of religious hatred behind it.
Absolutely none. Didn't care about religion at all.
That's just a good hoard, and let's go there.
Yes.
Huh.
Although having said that, I mean, a lot of them did convert to Christianity, including one that you know quite well. In fact, one that you probably, whose name you say, and we all say quite a lot, and you know who that is. It's King Harold Bluetooth.
Oh, you went there. Do you know what? I was sitting here. This is one of my favourite all-time facts, and I was sitting there thinking, do you think that'll fit in? Do you think that'll be appropriate? I might put it in, I might not. And then, boom, you said Bluetooth. Go for it, Bruce.
Well, Bluetooth was a Viking king.
Viking king.
Viking king. Anyway, so he was doubtful about Christianity and was happily going on raids and stuff. And then he met a priest called Poppo, and Poppo convinced Bluetooth to convert to Christianity when Bluetooth challenged him and said, "Okay, if you're so bloody religious, put your hand in this iron glove and then put your hand into the fire."
Huh.
And Poppo the priest said, "I believe in God. He won't let me come to any harm." Put his hand in the iron glove in the fire till it got hot. Took his hand out. His hand was completely unharmed. Bluetooth went, "Okay, you've got a God there. That's a pretty good God. I'll go with that one." And so he converted.
How interesting. I'd never actually heard that part of Bluetooth's story, but the bit I know is that this Danish king, Harold Bluetooth Gormson, apparently he had a really bad rotten tooth, which was slightly blue, and that's how he got his name.
Yeah, it makes sense.
He was responsible for bringing together a lot of very disjointed, disparate Scandinavian nations who were always infighting and battling, and he brought them together under one unified umbrella. And the people at Samsung and Ericsson and Nokia and people like that who were first talking about how do we get all these devices to talk to each other, they were reminded of Harold Gormson And so they decided to make that technology named after him, Bluetooth.
That makes complete sense now.
And the best bit, if you look at the Bluetooth symbol, which I am trying to do with my fingers, but that's useless because it's a podcast, that symbol is made up of two Danish runes for the words blue and tooth. So that symbol, that Bluetooth symbol, literally says Bluetooth.
In runic.
In runic, yeah. Brilliant. The stuff you learn on this show.
The most expensive thing that they owned, the most valuable thing that they owned, was their sword. Viking swords were so expensive.
Really?
I mean, it's basically the same price as a house. Can you imagine paying as much as you pay for a house for something that you could lose in battle?
Yeah, crikey, that's immense, isn't it?
Yeah.
And at a time when they weren't government issued either, you had to provide your own battle equipment.
Exactly. They were about 80 centimeters long, initially made of iron, but then when they were raiding places, especially in the Mediterranean, they found these other steels. Like there was some that came all the way from Sri Lanka.
Wow.
And they made a thing called crucible steel.
Okay.
And then from crucible steel, you could make a sword that wouldn't bend in battle, because the iron sword, you hit someone over the head and it just bends.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
It's not a very good thing, but steel is actually much better.
Right.
And there was one specific type of sword called an Ulfbert.
Right.
And an Ulfbert was the most expensive, amazing sword made out of steel that kept an edge, regardless of how many heads you knocked off with it or whatever. It was a really special sword. From very early on in British history, we have swords that have an edge, but you only have one edge, because it's quite dangerous to have a sword with two edges, because a double-edged sword is, that, as the expression says, you can hurt yourself with a double-edged sword. But the Viking swords were double-edged.
Really?
All of them were double. So they learned to fight with a double-edged sword, because it's much more effective, much more efficient to hack off things with.
Yes.
Because you can go, backhand, forehand right with your wrist in any direction.
Yeah.
So the Viking swords were double-edged.
Didn't know that.
They weighed about just over a kilo, 1.25 kilos ish. They weren't that heavy either.
Yeah. Huh.
They would decorate the hilts with filigree gold and silver. With nice runic patterns on them. They would name the sword with whatever. It could be the name of a god, or it could be somebody that they know, or just their own name.
Yes. Being from where they are from, in order to go on a raid anywhere, you have to cross quite a lot of water. So they were very, very proficient sailors and shipbuilders. We can all sort of picture a Viking longboat. It's long, it's quite thin. It's usually got a beautifully carved dragon's head or snake's head or something on the front. It's got lots of oarsmen, and it's got a big sail right in the middle. In fact, I'm picturing a cartoon from Asterix right now.
It's a square sail as well.
Square sail as well, yeah. And so these boats, obviously that's just one type of boat. They had small dinghies, they had big cargo vessels, but the longboat is the thing that we all sort of picture. So it had a big square sail, generally made out of wool, with leather strapping across it to help it keep its shape when it got wet. Mm-hmm. And you also had a load of oarsmen sitting, in nice uniform lines, so you could be going full tilt with the wind behind you and pulling at the oars as well. So they were very quick, very efficient, quite fierce. When you saw a fleet of these things coming at you, you knew you were in for trouble. They didn't have much of a keel, which meant that they could be used in shallow water. So when the Vikings, well, they did it several times, but on one of the occasions, the Vikings decided to have a go at Britain, and specifically London. You had this vast fleet of Viking longboats going up the River Thames as far as the River Lee, which is directly opposite Greenwich, or where the Millennium Dome is now. They got all the way past the River Lee at one point. They tied ropes around the old wooden London Bridge. Yep. And ripped London Bridge apart.
London Bridge is falling down.
Yes, I think that predates that. So yeah, these sort of very shallow-bottomed boats, very quick, very efficient, get in, rip stuff to shreds, get out again, and looking very, very beautiful at the same time.
Yes, they could carry about 60 people.
Yeah, yeah.
These boats. They're just amazing. People that they would then become thralls.
Thralls?
Thralls. Thralls is a Viking word for slave.
Is it?
Yes.
Huh.
They were quite prolific slave traders.
Right.
Although they treated the slaves pretty well,
Mhm.
they nevertheless, you would part of the valuables that you would take when you raided somewhere were people, and you could trade people when you got back to whatever village you came from in Scandinavia with your neighbours and make money that way.
Thralls. Now, does that, I'm purely speculating here, but it seems reasonable. Is that where we get the word enthralled?
Yeah.
Because you're enslaved, you're wrapped, you're captivated by
another
something.
one of those Viking words that we sort of pick up, like things like berserk.
Yes. So berserk, I think it comes from berserker, and a berserker was a particularly rough and ready sub-branch of warrior in the Viking community.
Yes. With a bit of sort of anger management attitude.
Oh, definitely.
Problems.
Absolutely. So the berserkers came in, they went berserk.
They did.
And that's that.
They did. And obviously they had names for places like, a thorp was a settlement.
Yes.
So all the places called Thorpe and Wick,
Yes.
we've said, and By being a village.
Yes.
But there is one thing that is Viking that I know you, Simon, will love.
Okay.
They used to carry their swords in like a shoulder strap,
Yes.
and then there was like a scabbard at the bottom.
Yeah.
And the shoulder strap that you carry your sword in
Yeah.
is called a baldric.
Hey! Is that right? Is that what
Yeah.
a baldric is?
Yeah.
Ah. I never knew that. So without the Vikings, Blackadder would not have had a baldric.
Exactly.
He'd have had a Steve or something. Not nearly as funny.
No. But we talked about long ships. They weren't the only things that were long. A Viking longhouse was where everybody lived, including all the animals generally.
Right,
So,
okay.
so there'd be enough space for you, your family, your cows, your sheep,
Yeah.
your goats. And they were actually quite green. They had turf, often a turf roof.
Oh,
So there's like, because, you get all these modern office blocks that have like green roofs. Well, the Vikings were into green roofs long before that.
wow.
And they kept it warmer as well, obviously.
Yes, good insulation.
Very good insulation. There would be like town halls. One of the long houses would be like the meeting place
Yes.
where you would go for a thing. There would be a thing happening there or whatever.
We're so in tune. I knew you were going to talk about things.
Why was I going to talk about things, Simon?
Because thing is an old Viking word that actually used to mean something quite important. Now it's just a knick-knack. But a thing used to be quite a thing, didn't it? It was, you gathered together for a meeting.
It's like a parliament almost, yeah. It was
Yeah, very much like a parliament.
Where things were decided. You went to the thing to decide stuff.
Yes, that's right, yeah. And now it just means I'm looking around my sound booth and there are 100 little things.
Or
Yeah.
you're going to an event and you go, what was
thing.
it? Going to a thing, yeah.
Yeah. That's now become a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. But thing used to be
An important
really a thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Apart from raiding and farming and making clothes and sails, they like their bit of fun. Did Vikings?
Oh, I bet.
They used to play all sorts of games, and one of the games they played was Piggy in the Middle. They sort of invented Piggy in the Middle.
Really?
They used to use bear skins wrapped up in a ball, and
Okay.
like sort of try and in two teams and try and sort of like keep the ball, keep throwing the bear skin between people as a thing.
Right.
They also liked skiing.
Did they?
They invented sort of rudimentary skiing, sort of langlauf, cross country skiing, not downhill.
Not downhill, sure.
But yeah, they were big into skiing
Right.
games. They played all, because if you think about it, if you live somewhere where the nights are very long in the winter,
Yes.
and it's very cold outside, you spend
Yes.
a lot of time indoors.
Yeah.
And if you don't want to get into massive fights with your family and the sheep and the goats that are in there with you as well, you need to play games. So they invented board games. They had some fantastic runic board games with beautifully carved pieces. They played sort of hide and seek. They would play all sorts of things just to amuse themselves in the winter before going off and seeing going shopping, so to speak.
Going shopping.
Well, that's all I've got on Vikings. How about you?
I think that's all I've got on Vikings as well. I think we have plundered and pillaged the subject sufficiently. We've made ourselves berserk.
So
there we go. That is another episode of Factoraly. Please like us, subscribe to us, comment on us. Go and have a look at the show notes on our website.
And tell your friends. Thank you ever so much for listening. We've thoroughly enjoyed this one.
And we hope you have too. If you have, please come again. If you haven't, please come again. It might be better next week.
Exactly. Until then, cheerio.
Goodbye.